As a composer, I find it most suitable to work with traditional notation when dealing with a professional chamber or symphony orchestra. Mainly because with limited rehearsal time, I can take advantage of their full artistic capacity and expertise, since they are familiar of interpreting this very rich and advanced notational system. But composing music for professional musicians using traditional notation also, of course, affects the artistic expression. As an alternative to traditional notation, scholars and composers have in recent years shown in various projects that animated music notation could facilitate new artistic expressions by making way for new exciting composition and performance practices. Even if a majority of these projects addresses professional musicians, some examples are to be found where people with varied musical background are involved in the performances using animated music notation. And in recent years, I've been interested in exploring these possibilities involving performers with varied musical backgrounds. More specifically, I'm interested in exploring the collective as musical expression, combining simple-to-perform individual parts into multi-layered musical textures in multiple parts. And in my artistic research project, Voices of Umeå, I gathered 200 citizens for the concert hall performance of a 45-minute composition, Everybody Scream. The people was mainly school children and instructed to make sounds using their voices, following animated music notation, synchronized with an electronic music part. In animated notation for Mixed Orchestra, which came out as a 15-minute composition, I wanted to continue to explore the collective as musical expression by combining a percussion orchestra of school children with a professional chamber orchestra and an additional electronic music part. The main issue was how to synchronize the different parts in a concert hall performance. And to take full advantage of the group's artistic possibilities, the model I came up with was an animated music notation system for the school children and an electronic conductor system for the chamber orchestra, reading traditional music notation. And both of the systems were created in the visual programming environment Max MSP. The animated music notation system needed to be intuitive since the limited rehearsal time, but also rewarding for the participators and with an artistic satisfying outcome for me as a composer. And it's a fine line because if the interaction is too simple, the performers may not be thrilled about the participation, which obviously would affect the artistic expression. Because of the target group, the animated music notation system was more inspired by video games such as SingStar and Guitar Hero than traditional music notation. And here you can see the screen is divided into colored squares numbered from 1 to 8. And each square is further divided into A, B and C. And the group of school children are divided into 24 parts, and each part is given a specific number and a letter. And each part is then instructed to follow the actions of their given number. An animated ball will come out and move from the left side to the right. And when the ball hits the right side on a certain number, the group with that specific number should trigger their sound, which could be hitting a snare drum, a wood block, or claves, for instance. The size of the ball determines which dynamics to use for their current sounds. A big ball, a loud sound, a small ball makes a soft sound. And for the electronic conductor, I decided to use a similar animated motion as the basic motions a human conductor makes when conducting. I created an exponential motion connected to a fader in Max MSP. And then I could control the tempo of the motion and connect that to the tempos in the composition. I also wanted to show the current bar numbers, so the chamber orchestra easily could navigate during the performance. And since the animated notation for mixed orchestra is a fixed composition, I recorded both the animated music notation and the electronic conductor in 2 separate video files and embedded the electronic music part in one of the files. Then I used an application called Bino to play the 2 video files in sync from one Mac Mini computer with 2 separate video outputs. And the video file containing the animated music notation was projected on a large screen visible for the school children and the audience. And the video file containing the electronic conductor was output through a splitter and further to 3 40-inch TV screens, which was placed in front of the orchestra at the conductor stand. The first rehearsal with the school children and electronics only came out well. 50 school children in the ages of 11 and 18 years old participated, and they had never before been in contact with animated music notation. The music material consisted of both various granular textures in different instrument combinations and synchronized single strokes in different instrument combinations. And the single strokes were both performed in sync with a common beat and in a polyrhythmic and polytempic manner, divided in multiple parts. My observations show that both the textures and the single strokes came out as intended. And the fact that the single strokes were not completely executed in sync made them sound even more interesting as a long-sounding single percussive orchestra stroke. And the thing I needed to work with was the dynamics, and even more important, the need of silence when they were supposed to play and when changing their instruments. In the second rehearsal I worked with these issues and I was finally satisfied with the result. And to mention, there were only 28 people this rehearsal, unlike the 50 people for the first rehearsal. Apparently, this rehearsal collided with a soccer game. And the first rehearsal with the chamber orchestra and electronics also came out well. They first played the composition from the beginning to the end, conducted by the electronic conductor. My observations show that some of the musicians had some difficulties of finding the right entrances. But this issue straightened out during this rehearsal, so I assumed that this was just being unfamiliar with the system. And the music material for the chamber orchestra could roughly be divided in 3 varieties. Multi-layered rhythmical textures, soundscape textures, and rhythmical patterns to a common beat. The first 2 came out real well this rehearsal. It was more problematic to get the orchestra performing together to the common beat of the electronic music part, conducted by the electronic conductor. Based on my experience of similar issues, working with an orchestra and electronic sounds, my action for the next rehearsal was to adjust the monitoring system containing the electronic music part. Especially the percussion section and the brass section got their monitoring system adjusted so they could lead the rest of the orchestra. And the result was immediately shown in the second rehearsal, and the orchestra could perform well synchronized with the electronic music part. And finally, for the grand rehearsal with all participators involved, the main thing was to work with the dynamics between the chamber orchestra, the children percussion orchestra, and the electronic sounds. The children were amplified with the ambition to better balance their performance with the chamber orchestra and electronics. And myself, I was sitting inside the orchestra to handle the technical setup, which made it hard to hear the actual concert mix. And for the next time, I will definitely be seated in the back of the audience for this reason.